Hi Soundies. A few of you have asked me about my creative process. It's hard to explain a creative process because it's individual, but it could be a handy guide. It's not something that I'll play in class, this video, but I'll put it on the website and you can review it if you like. I've noticed not so much this group or this year, but generally students tend to submit first drafts of their practice work. When they've finished their piece, they bounce it or they edit it and they hand it in a way that they might not do for an essay, or that they might edit a little bit more or hone or refine. So I'm going to show you that first drafts are first drafts, and that the end product could be and should be somewhat different to your first iteration. And so I'm going to talk about my creative process with regards to creating the Nighthawks Cafe. I write songs in different ways. So a lot of the time I have a more traditional approach. Or when I say traditional, when I was younger, I used to sit down and think, right, I'm going to write a song, pick up my guitar and have a bash. These days I don't do that. I just get my guitar when I'm watching telly or, of an evening, and I'll just footle around until I can come up with, until a kind of chord sequence or a riff or something, I think, ooh, and then I'll record it on my phone. 9 times out of 10, it's rubbish. But, 1 in every 10, because I'll then go to my studio and think, right, I want to do a song. So I'll troll through my various little fragments on my phone until I find something that I work up. So the one that I'm working on at the moment is based on this riff, which came from footling around, if I can play it. Just because you write it doesn't mean you can play it. That. So I'm basically currently working on that as a song. And those kind of songs will form a very traditional kind of structure. Verse, chorus, middle 8, solo, verse, chorus, end. The classic Beatles kind of, or the Squeeze or the Kinks, classic kind of songwriting techniques. When it comes to doing something of a more conceptual nature, and this was always going to be a conceptual piece, I tend to start with a loop. I rarely use Apple loops, in truth be told, because somebody else did those, but philosophically I'm not opposed to it. I tend to create my own loop, and I use that as a kind of foundation stone to build up a kind of a sound poem, really, because there's lots of sound in this piece. And this is what I started with this. Now, I wanted to create a piece which is an evocation or an invocation of the notion of the city, particularly a kind of mid-20th century city. That's my area of research, mid-20th century modernism. So there is an Edward Hooper painting, quite famous, called Nighthawks, and that's it. And I turned this photo into a little movie to put it into the movie section of Logic, so I could constantly refer to it to get inspiration. Does my groove, does my sound kind of fit the mood and the tones and the colour palette of this painting? It is not a representation of this painting, it is an evocation of that environment. And there are a variety of different city songs that I'm currently working on. This is the one that's taken the longest. This is the kind of centerpiece, really. It's the least song-like of all the tracks, but it's the one that is an evocation of the city that I'm happiest with. So I will always start with a loop, just to get going, just to feel if I can get the mood. And it usually is a bass loop, and in this case, it's actually a synth bass loop. I usually play bass guitar. For my traditional songs, I use it's over there, you can't see it, but it's hanging on the wall, my bass guitar. But for these kind of things, I tend to use synth bass. So this is my bass loop. Let me turn it up a bit. That's all it is. it just repeats. So I kind of like that kind of slow pulse of the city at night. It kind of felt right. And at the moment, I'm not thinking, I'm sort of just feeling it a little bit. I wanted a bit more dissonance. I wanted a bit more grit. So I doubled the line using an upright bass patch, an acoustic bass patch, along with the original synth bass, and adds a little bit of growl. After which I decided it needs some rhythm, so I added a kick and hat, and I sampled clicking my fingers and put that in as well. And so we have as the basic loop this. Finally, it needed a bit of keyboard, and so I added some electric piano. I'll solo it so you can just hear what it is. Here we are. That's all it is, all the way through. And I quantized it, look. So it's locked in tight. And that's the foundation block, the foundation stone on which I looked to build my edifice, my sound poem. Okay, so I prevaricate. I'm not entirely sure what's happening, so I start doing kind of sub-vocally sounds, and I come up with a backing vocal. And as you can see, it's 3 tracks. The truth is, though, I only ever recorded it once, and every time I came up with this, I just sliced it and put onto 3 tracks. So it's actually 1 track recording that's been chopped up into 3 tracks, and I do a very wide panning all the way to the left, all the way to the right, and in the center. And so I shall play these now. By the way, the fact that I'm showing you or playing you stuff that I'm singing, particularly when we get to this bit here, the improv, shows an enormous amount of trust on my part. I would never, ever show my workings normally, but in art, you give of yourself. And if I want to be a creative teacher or teach a creative subject, I've got to be prepared to do it. And this is the first time I've done this. So I'm feeling a bit uneasy, but I'll see if I can get past it. Anyway, so here we are. Here are the backing vocals. So I'm kind of feeling it a bit now. I'm thinking I'm on the right track. Once I got those backing vocals, I had a nice bit of warm reverb, really up close, that kind of throat kind of sounds, kind of quite emotive. It's at this point I decide that I'm writing from the perspective of this guy here. This is my central character. At this point in the stage of the development of the song, it's him. Okay, so prevaricating still further, I decide to try a bit of guitar on there before I actually confront the vocals, because I've not thought about lyrics, I've not thought about content, I've not thought about melody at all. I'm still on this kind of groove. So I thought, I know, I'll just faff around with a bit of guitar. So I'll play you a bit of this. Had great fun. That never makes the cut. I don't think it even makes it to version 2. The backing vocals are the same, except I just use the last bit for the outro. So this here is just the last bit. and I kind of like it. Okay, so the time has come to start thinking about what I'm going to sing. Now, writing a conventional song, I'll sort of improvise lyrics as I write the song, as I do the chord sequence, in order to find the melody and to find the scansion of the song, how the words fit. And I'll usually find some theme in there, and I'll write out lyrics properly, and then I'll evolve them, because it might look good on the page, but it's hard to sing, or certain words don't come out clearly, and so I'll just revise it and tweak it. In this instance, when I'm doing this kind of work, which begins entirely with improv, really, I decide to improv a vocal. I have no idea what I'm going to sing. I have no idea what the melody is going to be like. I'm kind of feeling my way, and I'm just using words as sounds to a certain extent. I really, really don't want to play this. Oh, what the hell. Okay, so here we go. This is me singing and finding the words, or some words, and the melody at exactly the same time. And so I'm very kind of slurry, and I'm just trying to get the mood. I'm trying to get the feel. Catch a moment from the daytime, I wrap it round with night. I try to find some meaning within. I just can't seem to get that figure right one. I'm just I'll post this as a completed track on YouTube, so if you really want to listen to the whole thing, feel free, but I think we've had enough of that. And that's it, really. That was the first day's work on this project. Just to point out, look at the effects that I've put on the vocal improv. So I put in overdrive, creamy tube. Tube is valve, analog technology. It's used to emulate valve microphones. My condenser mic, this mic here, which I don't know if you can see, is an Octava 319. It's a wide diaphragm condenser mic, but it's not valve one. It's not a tube one. So that adds a little bit of grit, a little bit of warmth. Then I've got a rotor speaker, a Leslie speaker. Normally you would just use this for a Hammond organ sound, but I use it on this vocal line, mainly because John Lennon used it on his vocal line for Tomorrow Never Knows from Revolver. I thought, oh, I'll try that. And guitars sound pretty good through it as well. Delay, so I added a kind of delay, just a simple delay, repeating delay, and finally chroma verb. I just use a room sound. Now the order in which you place these insert effects is quite important, because subsequent effects will be affected by the previous effect. So it's like a chain. So overdrive is first, and then the rotor will affect the overdriven sound, and the delay will affect the overdriven rotor sound, and so on. So the order which you put them in is quite important, really, though only important in the sense that you want to get the right sound. So if you're not got quite the right sound, you can always change the order in which they are by just dragging them up or down and see whether that makes any difference. So what I would do then is I would make a quick MP3 copy of this, plonk it onto my phone, and then obsessively listen to it while I walk my dog around Windsor Great Park every morning. Whenever I walked him, I'd be listening to this track again and again and again. And in my mind, I'm painting in detail and pictures because I like to see it before I do it. This was just improvisation. It's the initial inspiration. The rest becomes formulated and becomes more about craft. And from this point on, I'm crafting. I now know kind of what I want. I couldn't articulate it, but I kind of have a feeling here. It doesn't make sense, I know, but this is my creative process. This is not something that is easily definable, anybody's creative process, and it won't be the same as yours. This is just for illustrative purposes, and also to reinforce the notion that first, second, third, fourth drafts are important to get it exactly the way that you imagine that it should be. Okay, so this ends part 1. I'll go on to Nighthawks 2 next. Now we come to the second iteration. And it's essentially the same as the first. Look, all of this stuff is the same. Just play it. So, upright bass, Rhodes, kick, everything we saw in the first one. Let's look at the vocals. So I've stack tracked all of this stuff. So here are the backing tracks, the backing vocals, they're the same as version 1. If you look all the way down here, you can see Vox Improv and the guitar I've just minimized and shoved at the bottom, probably to be deleted by the next one. We'll find out when I open it. So what I've done is I've formulated the lyrics somewhat, though I will still continue to hone and to treat them. They're a little bit more, there's more of them, and it's a little bit more concise. I delivered it a bit more clearly, because the rhythm is kind of da 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 da, and I've put a slow delay on it, so I really need to be a little bit more precise in my delivery in order for that slow delay to stay in time with the piece. The only other difference is I tend to record a track where I'm just making noises, and if I like any of it, I'll chop it up and lay it under. And so my BV4 and BV5 are just me going, I think. There they are. And then the vocal. Again, I'll post this up online so you can listen to the whole thing should you want to. I'm just going to mute all of this stuff for a second, because I want now to talk about the sound effects, and this is the real difference. Of course I've tidied up the vocals, I've added a few bits and pieces, but really we're looking at the sampler. So I've split the sound effect into sampler and FSX audio. These are audio tracks. Rain, 2 types of rain, I'll explain that later, and some car horns and stuff like that. And also this is door knocks and little cocktail party at the very end. This SFX sampler is when I've taken sound effects and I've placed them in the sampler, not so much for traffic and the horns, but certainly for these 2 effects here. These are in time. So my wipers, as you can also see, by the way, I started to think binaurally in my sound effects. Not here, this is still all kind of central. I don't know why I put the Rhodes to the side, but it's just generally all central. It's here that I start to think about spatiality when it comes to the sound effects. So I'm just going to solo these wipers. I can play them on the keyboard. So that's about the pace there. And that's just me playing it all the way through. And it's you know, to say so, I'm not really sure why I wanted the wipers in. Is he in a car? I'm not so sure. But anyway, I put them in, and I also wrote in a kind of backwards or a behind you kind of effect. So the windscreen wipers are behind the character. Remember, the character's here. I don't know why I did that, but anyway, I did. And as you can see, and you can see the movement. and it all fits in. And I think, all right, we're cooking now. I get the sense right now. That's the beat of the city right there for me. That's the core of the piece. And then footsteps. Walking slowly. And if we look, I have the footsteps walking across the frame. So they get quieter, louder and quieter based on how binaural panning works. Add some traffic, some car horns, and we're starting to build up. So we still have the sound in the center of the music, but this is starting to move all the way around it. And then finally the sound effects audio. If you look at the heavy rain is to the front, and the street rain is to the back. So we've got heavy rain ahead of us, about 16 meters away, and street rain behind us, about 8 meters away. So let me just open all that up. A few cars and stuff like that, and this is where we are. And there you have it. And again, I repeat the process. I bounce it down as an MP3 file, not really mixed, just track laid with level set, apart from some of the binaural elements that I've mixed. And I listen to it obsessively, and I add detail in my head. I take stuff out until I'm ready for the next version. So we'll finish it here, and we'll go into the next version, Nighthawks 3. Okay, so Nighthawks version 3. Looking at this now, I've done a few things which suggests to me that this is a timeline to create the cafe. Because I've done some things that I wouldn't normally do. For example, if I was continuing on this as a finished piece, for example, I've created, let's solo it, the basic track. So I've mixed that down. So I've mixed that down. I've also audiophied the wipers, which I would probably normally do, converted it from the sampler to audio by using bounce in place. Good. And also the same is true, these are mix downs. I can see MD stands for mix down. So I've mixed down the sampler, all of the traffic sounds and all of the weather sounds. I've mixed those down, which is something I would probably do. Because by this time, despite stack tracking, I'm starting to get quite a few files. So I've got my traffic. my weather. I did it in the last one, but I forgot to mention it, as I put a bit of Andy Warhol in. I'll just solo it. Andy Warhol basically recorded most of his life on cassette, and I managed to get hold of some clips. So here we go.
Oh, wow, look at it. It's flying. Oh, look at it. Oh, oh.
And there's another one further along somewhere. I can't see it here. It's definitely there though. And so I just added a bit of, to make it New York really. Okay, so there we go. What I have done, I'll have mixed the footsteps and the wiper. So I will have mixed the footsteps into there probably. I've added lots more footsteps because those footsteps in the first version, or the last version I should say, Nighthawks 2, were in time. These are all in time as well. But there's a lot more of them to create a sense of busyness. And again, as you can see, lots of movement, lots of dynamics. There we go. I'll just solo these. You get the idea. As you can tell, lots of movement, lots of dynamic movement. Get rid of those. And as you can see, it changes at certain points, but they're all in time. They're just quicker or slower. So part of this process was to add more footsteps, but it suddenly occurred to me as I was listening obsessively on my iPhone when I was walking the dog, is that I'm trying to create a piece called Nighthawks Cafe, and there's no cafe sequence. This guy, remember, it's this guy walking around the town. So at some point he's got to go into the cafe. So I suspect the whole point of this was to create the cafe environment, and this is version 1. And it's very basic at the minute. I've got, as you can see, everything stops, the beat stops, there's a big gap, and I've started putting in some Muzak. I wrote really quite quickly a little jazzy Muzak thing. I've also, I wonder if it's on here. I don't know if it's on here. Let me just click on it. Let's put it on there. Those are my footsteps, or some of them. Maybe it's not on that track. Maybe it's on another track. But I added a clock tick. So even though the rhythm finishes, I keep that wiper rhythm, the windscreen wiper rhythm, along with a clock tick, like a electric clock on the wall. So I'm just going to solo that, and so you can have a little bit of a, yeah. There's the clock tick. It's actually on this track. With a few kind of very quiet sound effects in the background. Let me play that through. So we've got a door being open with a little bell sound. and there's a couple of factory people recordings made of factory people being interviewed, and I'm making those the conversations along with the clock tick. There's obviously something going on here as well. Or maybe not. So put that together with my music, and we have this. And also coffee cups and pouring of coffee. So there we have it. So I've introduced the cafe into this whole sequence. That's predominantly what I've done, the footsteps and the cafe, and I suspect when we come to look at the final iteration of Nighthawks Cafe, which is the final version, you'll see this stuff all converted into audio and imported back into the original version of Nighthawks 2 perhaps, and then developed accordingly. I don't know, because I wasn't really considering describing my creative process when I was working on this. I was just going with the flow. As you can see though, craft has started to set in.
Stop for a while in a high-key room. Chrome and steam, commercial perfume, slick vitreous cut. Try not to look out.
And we're back in again. So what you'll find when we go to version 3, the final version, you'll be pleased to know, is that all of that goes. Well, all of the music goes. I don't keep the music. I decide to go another direction to make it a far more complicated. It's actually, the final design is rather more cluttered than this image suggests. But, you know, what the hell. That's to inspire. I'm not going to be slavishly thinking, oh, there's only 4 people there. I can't have that much sound. But, you know, bugger that. I do what I like. Okay, and so anything else? Just footsteps. We've still got this at the end. I had some phones. That's all still on the mix down here. That can only be the only explanation, that I mixed this down in order to add the footsteps and the cafe sequence without there being too many files. You know, there'd be loads and loads of tracks by this point. So I'm probably just doing that, and this version 3 is just a quick mix down of the various important elements so that I can then introduce the cafe. Okay, so we'll finish that here, and part 3 or part 4, the final part, we'll be looking at the final version and also to introducing a new singer and how that might affect the whole process, or how I think about the project. Okay. Okay. So, we get to the final version of Nighthawks. Yeah, let me close all these down. It's a bit intimidating. I put all those up for when I produce the actual movie clip for this version. I just switch off my Outlook so that I don't get trings. Okay, so here we are. So let's have a look at all of the sounds, because I've stack tracked a lot of these. So we've got sound effects. Let's move this down a bit so we can see them all in one. There we go. So we have various sound effects, including the mix for the footsteps, the mix for the traffic, and the mix for the weather that I showed you in the last version. So those are our sound effects. Various of the different bits and pieces. This is the new version of the cafe. Backing tracks, as you can see, I've now gone back to the MIDI, although I've glued them all together. But it's essentially exactly the same as they were in version 1, unchanged. I can close that down. We don't need to look at that so much. They're exactly the same. Including the windscreen wipers. Oh, that's not on the stack track, but the wipers are the same. So I'll just drag that down there. So all of those are the same as the last version. The backing vocals, again, are the same, including my clops. All of that stuff is identical. What has changed predominantly, apart from the fact that it's been given a good old solid mix, is this. So I'm just going to play this. This is the point. How shall I say this? Lydia Scarlett, who used to be a student here. Have I got a photo of her? I did. Here we go. There she is, looking very glam. I think that's a publicity shot. She's a singer, a Moldovan singer. Actually, for the last couple of years, she's written the Moldovan entry for the Eurovision Song Contest. Her aunt sang, but anyway, she's a well-known celebrity. She was a child star in Moldova, and she came to Royal Holloway some years ago to do her undergraduate degree. And last year, she came to do some teaching on the Moving Pictures course, which is now no longer running. So I took advantage of that by asking her to come and sing on this track and a few others, actually. And we were this is March 2020. And so we were all kind of sort of, not necessarily in lockdown, but everything was shut down. So, and she was living on campus. So I'd go and pick her up and she'd come over to my house and we would record some tracks. And so here it is. I'm going to play you just Lydia and the various things that she did.
Think about the day to come, where I want to be, something that I have begun, hope to set me free, and a walk, I don't talk. Catch a fragment from the daytime, wrap it around with night, cast around for some meaning within, just can't seem to catch it right.
Let's just add some sound effects.
For a while, walking for a short time.
Okay, so there's a lot going on there. So we have positioned here, this remains static. We have her voice, which I've pitched binaurally in the center, should be really kind of there. Yeah, so it's the sound, the voice is there in the immersive. Then, and that's an audio track. Then her harmony, again, this moves, as you can see.
Danger moves in different shapes, roaming through the low key.
And it's kind of a slower analog of the
Shield
windscreen
your
wipers.
eyes as cars squirt by.
And I'll take the sound effects. Oh God, there's a lot of them as well. Let's move those. So the harmony and then the whisper. This also moves, and she is just whispering the lines.
Don't expect the light to set you free, just seems to go round.
And it's got a very big, large hall reverb on her voice. That's a trick I learned from The Doors. If you listen to Riders on the Storm, oh, cup of tea, lovely. If you listen to Riders on the Storm, there's a vocal, Riders on the Storm, yeah, Jim Morrison, but he's also whispering the line as well, Riders on the Storm, underneath, and that added a certain texture. And so I thought, well, I'll steal that idea. And so...
Shield your eyes as cars squirt by. Don't expect the light to set you free, just seems to go round and round.
Yeah. So we've got the whisper, the harmony. So the whisper and the harmony move around, and then she did sort of pa-pa-pas and stuff like that, and hums and clicks, because she's a singer like me. She did it automatically. So these are sampled. I put them.
Think about
Let's just.
the day.
And these also move. The clicks, actually. Do I move the clicks? I can't remember. Yeah, it looks like I probably forgot to mix it. So already we're getting this kind of syncopated rhythm, aren't we? With just the vocals. But that's not all.
The day to come, where I want to be.
So if we go into here, and I can show you the mix, this particular track, let's show you the send to delay. Oh, I thought I switched it on and off. Am I on the right track? Yes. Oh, how did I do that then? Maybe it was a different one. Ah, send mute delay. There we go. Sorry, I had the wrong one. So remember, we've done this. We did this in class. And it allows me, I'm going to solo it, to actually only have the echo, not all the way through because it would clutter up the voice, but at the end. So
Think about the day
it's muted.
to come, where I want to be. Something that I have begun, hope to set me free. in a walk. I don't talk. Catch a fragment from the daytime.
You get the idea. Let's turn that off because it's scary. Okay, so that's not all I did. Also, effects outputs. These are all the different reverberations and the different delays and the various different effects that I've had. And if we play, you will see the delay is moving around. So
cast around for some meaning within. Just can't seem to catch it right. Walking for a while.
So that while, and all those is actually this, and I'm panning it round and around. So there's always movement. There's always a dynamic kind of sense of movement. And of course, because I know how to sing singing, I started to take this very, very seriously indeed. So here we go.
Think about the day to come, where I want to be. Something that I have begun. Hope to set me free in a walk. I don't talk. Catch a fragment from the daytime.
So the next thing is the Andy Warhol.
Then around and around.
And I positioned those in specifically at that point. Up to this point, I'd been putting them just about anywhere, but I decided on where it had to go. What I worked on mostly in this version, apart from all of this, which took a while, as you can imagine, just to have that as effective as possible, is the cafe. And I told you in the last one, I had this kind of little jazz music, elevator music little thing that I composed. And I didn't really like that, so I've gone for something else. I found a kind of an Old Spice radio advert. And so it's playing on the radio. We can't see the radio here, but in my version, there's a radio on the wall, and it's playing this. I don't know. I kind of like that. Also, I've put this patch on, which is the phone filter notch, which is my favourite effect patch, just to make it sound radio-y. On top of that, let me just... Well, I'll tell you what. Then we've got static. I don't know why I put it in. Maybe for just a bit of texture. Oh, I'm using a steam. So it's static, but I'm using it as steam. So this works when combined with this effect, which you've already heard, which is just the coffee cups and the coffee pouring. And then I use it again. I don't know why. Maybe as a segue into the next bit. Okay, and on top of that, I had Lydia speaking in her own tongue. And because the voice is now, we're no longer this person, we're this person. Yeah, the song is about this person, or she is the character. And so she's from overseas, and this is Lydia just improvising some conversation.
Ați simțit cu tremurul săptămâna trecută? Da. Da. Marți, poate miercuri? Probabil. Da, este cam târziu deja.
And then Factory Talk are interviews conducted by Professor Jean Wainwright about 10 years ago. And I just used those as conversations in the room.
Ați simțit cu tremurul săptămâna trecută? Da. Marți, poate miercuri?
Woke up somewhere. I could hear this fantasy words where people were saying things about thousands of people being at the St. Patrick's and then
So that, on top of the vocal track, I'll play the whole thing, this whole little sequence now, and including some of the sound effects that we'd had earlier on, combined together, make this.
woke up somewhere. I could hear this fantasy words where people were saying things about thousands of people being able to St. Patrick's and then
church bell, the phone, the cocktail party, dog barking because of the door knock. So there you have it. The only other thing I can talk about is the Atmos beds. If I click on here, these were just, I'm trying to remember now. I definitely created them. Yeah, I definitely created them. I might have found them somewhere. I can't remember where I found them. The fact that it's 13 in brackets 13 suggests that I found them on the sound effects library and decided to play them because they reminded me a little bit. Is this as well? Let's have a look at this one as well. Oh, it's the same one. It's the same effect, I believe. Yeah. I'll solo them. This just adds tension. It also reminds me a little bit of the San Francisco foghorn that I had earlier on that seemed to have got lost in the process. And so I'm just laying this underneath to add a bit of depth to the mix.
Think about the day to come, where I want to be, something that I have begun, hope to set me free, and the walk I don't.
And so I suppose it's 22 minutes in. That makes this probably about a half an hour program now when I edit it all together. But there we are. I mean, I could go into more detail. I won't, I promise. But I could, go into all of the different effects that I have playing. Though there's not that much, actually. It's all in the mixing. Footsteps have got EQ in it. What kind of EQ is that? I don't know what it is, but I might have created it myself to add it so it wouldn't cut through quite so much. Same with the traffic, just compressors, a bit of EQ on the weather, taking off some of the top so it wouldn't be too trebly. And there we have it. And it's finished. Yeah. And it is finished, though I've identified a few things in just doing this program, just doing this clip. I've identified a few things that I want to change because the truth is you're never ever fully happy, and it is will this irritate the bugger out of me the more I listen to it decision you make. If I don't quite like that, you think, but I can live with it. If you know every time you hear it's going to annoy you more and more, change it. But otherwise, you're never ever fully happy with a mix. But you know when it's done. You kind of know when it's done. And for me, it's when I had so many tracks that anything else would have been oversaturation. Some might say it already is. But I'm happy with it. And it's one of 3 songs that Lydia sang for me that make up the cityscape. And she's going to sing a few more when I send her the Logic files to Moldova, a letter of Christmas off. But the point of doing all of this, if indeed there is a point, is to show you that creative projects evolve and develop over time. And don't be afraid of that. So don't schedule a time to get it done the day before to upload onto the server for assessment. Get it done a couple of weeks beforehand to give you a week of listening and a week of tweaking. And I promise you will get a higher grade because the more detail you put in, the better it's going to be. Well, unless there's too much detail because there's no hard, fast rule. But I'll just put it like this. The devil is in the detail. And it is detail that sets things apart. Knowing how much detail to sketch in, knowing how much just wash to leave, well, that's a creative decision, and that's entirely up to you as creative beings. So I'll sign off now. Hope you enjoyed this. Hope you weren't too bored. And if you feel so inclined, I've posted all of the different iterations of this track in this playlist, so you can have a bit of a listen if you so wish. No pressure. Go and have a cup of tea. I know I am.